we're looking at slopes of lines. Okay, so last year in algebra, you worked with slope. Okay, we have to kind of review that so we can continue here. So the slope of a line is the change in y over the change in x. Okay, so in words we have change in y divided by the change in x. Okay, so y's are in the numerator, x's are in the denominator. Okay, so our different slopes are a negative slope. Okay, so your negative slope looks like this. So that would be a negative slope that is up and to the left. Okay, or down and to the right, same thing. Positive slope this way. That's up to the right. Our slope of 0 is a horizontal line. Okay, slope of 0 is horizontal, and an undefined slope is vertical. Okay, so if you still don't remember the difference between a slope of 0 and an undefined slope, think about when you're walking. Okay, so you can walk on a slope of 0, it's flat. On an undefined slope, you can't walk up a wall. Okay? Yeah, if you have some mountain climbing gear, but okay, no. Without that, you can't walk a vertical line.
You want to see?
No, I don't want to see. So to find your slope given some points, I have the formula there. It is rise over run. Okay, so that is y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. Okay, so that's the formula we want to use to find our slope. Now, if your equation only has one variable, so say you have y equals 5 or x equals negative 2. Okay, so with your y equals a constant, so if it equals any number, you're going to have a horizontal line and a slope of 0. Okay? So if you were to graph that y equals 5, okay, this would be your x-axis and your y-axis. You want to go up to where it is y is equal to 5. Okay? And then that would be your horizontal line. Now if you have x equals a constant, such as negative 2, this is a vertical line and you have an undefined slope. Okay, so if I were to draw that one, okay, this is x, that's y. You would want to go where x is equal to negative 2. So if negative 2 is over here, you'd want all of your x values to be negative 2. So it'd be that vertical line. All right, so I do want to practice finding the slope. So in this first one, we want to find the slope of each of the lines here. This first one here, we're given 2 points. Okay, now we're going to use that formula I highlighted above, that y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. It helps to label your points if you still get confused where to place them. So in this first coordinate, I have x sub 1 and y sub 1, and x sub 2 and y sub 2 in that second one there. Okay, and then I can plug in those values in the formula above. Okay, so my slope, we use m, is equal to y sub 2 is negative 2 minus y sub 1 is negative 6 all over x sub 2 is 0 minus x sub 1 is 3. Okay, so I have negative 2 minus a negative 6. That's positive 4. And I have 0 minus 3. That's negative 3. Okay, so my slope would be negative 4/3 for that line right there. Okay, so that's if you're given those two coordinate points. Now in the next ones, I'm given a graph. So on the graph, you can count between your points. So you want the rise over the run. So in letter B here, we're going between point M and point L. So we're going to rise first. So count those, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I'm rising 6. Over your run from that point, so going this way, 1, 2, 3. And since I'm going left, that'll be negative. Okay, so for this slope here, my rise was 6, and my run was negative 3. And I can simplify that to negative 2. Coming back to you? All right, letter C. We're finding the slope between points N and P. That one is a horizontal line. So what's the slope of this one? 0. Okay, the slope of this line would be 0 since it is a horizontal line. In letter D, this one is a vertical line. So this slope would be undefined.
Is there no abbreviation? I mean, it's right. Is there nothing you can write to what's...
I don't know what you wrote last year.
I think you just...
So do you remember why this is undefined? Anybody? Do you remember why it's undefined?
Because it's straight up and down, and you can't walk up a wall.
Okay, yeah. But if you were to take these points, Q and R here, and plug it into our slope formula, your x's would result in a 0 on the bottom. Okay, so you can't divide a number by 0. It's considered undefined. Okay, that's why the slope of your line is undefined. Okay, so if you were to ever have 2 points like this, okay, and you had a number such as 2, and it was over 0, once you simplified, that slope would be undefined. It would not be 0. Okay, you can't have a 0 in the denominator. Make sense? All right, so moving on to the back. So that was your refresher on slope. Now we want to talk about slopes of parallel lines and perpendicular lines. Okay, so with parallel lines, the slopes are the same. Okay, so your slopes should all be the same for parallel lines. So all vertical lines are parallel. Okay, because all of those slopes would be undefined. Okay, so if you have 2 undefined slopes, they're still parallel. You forgot the symbol for parallel is our 2 parallel lines there. Okay, so we can use our symbol for parallel. Now, perpendicular lines, those slopes are opposite reciprocals. Okay, so opposite reciprocals. So the product of those slopes, if you multiply them together, you should get -1. So say I found a slope that was, let's say -4. Okay, and I want to find the slope that's perpendicular to that. So you would take the opposite sign, hence opposite, so now it'd be positive, right? 4 is also considered 4/1. So we take the opposite, and then your reciprocal, you flip your fraction. Okay, so this would be 1/4 instead. Okay, so this slope would be the slope perpendicular to my original. Now if I were to multiply those two together, I'd end up with -1. So you can check that you got the correct perpendicular slope. If you multiply your original by the one you got, you should get -1. Okay, it's a good way to check. Now your symbol for perpendicular, again, is an upside down T. Okay, so those segments perpendicular. Vertical lines and horizontal lines are perpendicular to each other. Okay, so those are perpendicular. So if you have a slope of 0, its perpendicular slope would be undefined, and vice versa. Okay? So now we're going to find our slopes perpendicular to each of these. So in letter A here, we have a slope of 2/7. So to get that perpendicular slope, we need to take the opposite sign. So this one's positive. So our new sign is negative. So opposite sign. And then take the reciprocal of that fraction. So we want to flip it. So 7/2. Okay, so that would be your perpendicular slope. Letter B, we have 5. Since that one's positive, take the opposite, so it's now negative. This was technically 5/1. So we want to take the reciprocal, so we need to flip that fraction to 1/5. Okay, notice if I multiply that original times my new slope, I would get -1 in each case. Now this one, letter C. If I have -4/-9, how could I rewrite that? 4/9. Okay, if I have a negative over a negative, it is a positive. Okay, so I have 4/9. Now I want to take the opposite reciprocal of that number. Okay, so now this is positive. So my opposite would be negative.
Wait, so why would you do that?
I didn't take the opposite reciprocal of this, I rewrote it.
Okay.
Because this is both negative, I just explained it. Now it's positive. So I'm taking the opposite sign, it's negative. Then I have to take the reciprocal, so flip your fraction to 9/4. Last one, I have a negative. Take the opposite, so now it's positive. You don't have to write the plus. I'm just going to so you see what's going on. This is 3/1. I need to take that reciprocal, so now it's 1/3. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay, in the next section, we want to determine whether line AB and line CD are parallel, perpendicular, or neither. Okay, so in order to do this, our first step is to find the slope of each line. Now we're given those coordinates up here. Okay, so for A, B, we're using those two coordinates. So again, if you need to label them to plug them into that slope formula, you can. So for letter A, that would be x sub 1 and y sub 1. And b would be x sub 2 and y sub 2. Okay, so to find that slope, we're taking y sub 2, so negative 5, minus y sub 1, over x sub 2 is negative 1, minus x sub 1 is 1. So we have negative 6 over negative 2. So this will be equal to positive 3. Okay, and then next one we need to find the slope of CD, so these 2 points. Again, you can label those x sub 1, y sub 1, x sub 2, y sub 2. So we can plug those into our slope formula. So first we're taking y sub 2, which is 1, minus y sub 1 is 2, over x sub 2 is 6, minus x sub 1 is 3. So 1 minus 2 is negative 1. 6 minus 3 is 3. Okay, so after step 1 here, since I'm determining whether these are parallel, perpendicular, or neither, I have a slope of 3 and a slope of negative 1/3. So in order to be parallel, they have to have the same slope. In order to be perpendicular, they have to have opposite reciprocals. And oblique, which is neither, they wouldn't have the same or they wouldn't be opposite reciprocals. Okay? These do have opposite reciprocal slopes. So these would be perpendicular lines. Any questions on number 3 there? All right, I want you guys to do the same thing right here. Okay, so find the slope of AB, find the slope of CD, and then tell me if they are parallel, perpendicular, or neither. Actually, have to use the protractor part. Just first for that. All right, so for the one I wanted you to try, the slope of line AB, you should have gotten 13 over 25. And the slope of line CD, I got 12. Okay, so both of these slopes, okay, they're not the same. Okay, and they're not opposite reciprocals. Okay, that means they're oblique lines. So you could have wrote oblique or neither. I'll accept both. Questions? All right, so the last section here, I have some graphing lines. So I just want you to use the straight edge of the protractor I handed you. You don't actually have to use the protractor, just the straight edge part. So in number 3, we want to graph the line that contains 0.35 and has a slope of -2. Okay, so I'm going to plot my point. So right 3, up 5. Here's my point. Now I want to use my slope of -2. So you can either rise 2 and go left 1, or you can go down 2 and right 1. Okay? Either way. And then straight edge. Connect to those points. That should be my line. Okay, so I know you guys did that last year in algebra. Okay? Now, number 4, we want to graph the line that contains this point and is parallel to a line with a slope of 3. So if it's parallel to that line with a slope of 3, what does our line slope have to be? Identical. Okay, so we're still using that slope of 3 for the line that we want to draw in. Okay, because parallel lines have the same slope. So again, I'm going to plot this point. So -4, -3. And then my line has to have a slope of 3 since it has to be the same as that slope. So we'll go up 3 and right 1. Okay, up 3, right 1. So then I go rise over run. And then I can connect those points with my straight edge. That would be my line. Okay, last one. We want to graph a line that contains 0.06 and is perpendicular to a line with these 2 points. So I need to find the slope of this line. Now, 2 ways you could do this. You can either graph it and then count, or you can use the formula that we had on the front. Okay? Doesn't matter. You can use either. I'm just going to find that slope. So I need y sub 2, which is 1, minus y sub 1 is 2, over x sub 2, 5, minus x sub 1 is 0. Okay, so I should get -1/5 as my slope for this line. Now I need the slope of a line perpendicular to it. Okay, so my perpendicular slope would equal what? 5 over 1. Okay, so my slope that's perpendicular to that would be 5. So I took the opposite, so it's now positive, and then the reciprocal of that fraction, so 5 over 1. So now I can plot my point. Well, I found -1/5. To take the opposite reciprocal, I need the opposite sign, so it's now positive. And then flip your fraction. So 5/1. So now I can plot my point 0, 6. Okay, now since if I went up 5 and right 1, it would go off my graph, I can go down 5 and left 1. Okay, and that would still be a positive slope because you have a negative over a negative. Okay, and again, I can go down 5 and left 1. And then connect my points. And draw my line. So if you drew in the other line, okay, with those other 2 points and found your slope that way, you should see they are perpendicular. And if you want to do that, just to make sure, you can. So if I go 0, 2, 5, 1. If I plot those 2 points and I draw those in, okay, your lines should look perpendicular to each other there, where they intersect. Okay, if they don't, then you messed up your slope somehow. Okay, any
What?
questions?
Now you're not breaking this one.
Okay.
No?
No. You have like, I don't know.
That's
Yeah. No, it's not 10 minutes.
fine.
It's like 14. It goes to 7.